All right. So today's in-service is all about working with nitrate in Nebraska. More than likely, if you're participating in the in-service today, you or maybe one of your clientele have experienced high nitrate drinking water issues. And that's really why we are here. So today we will discuss what nitrate looks like in Nebraska, the health impacts of nitrate specific to Nebraska. We will cover the basics of treating drinking water for nitrate and walk you through a program that just started on the 1st of this month to help address nitrate issues through a rebate program for private drinking water well owners in Nebraska. So I won't belabor this, but I want you to know nitrogen is a vital nutrient. It helps plants and crops grow. It is essential to our Nebraska agricultural industry and our economy. But when we get high concentrations in our water, we see harmful effects on both people and wildlife and nature. So very simply, when nitrogen enters a system, bacteria convert it into these different forms of nitrogen that plants can use. And when that form turns into nitrate and moves into our groundwater, that's where we begin seeing health issues. So nitrogen can leave our soil when crops get harvested. It can become gaseous and go back to the atmosphere. But when water carries it away to surface water and groundwater, that's when we have an issue. At that point, when the nitrogen leaves the part of the soil where the roots are located, it becomes a liability for those things, for groundwater, for surface water, and for our community vitality. So in Nebraska, approximately 88% of us get our drinking water from groundwater. If we didn't include the MUD system, which is a municipal system serving part of Omaha, that number goes to nearly 100%. And when we look at rural Nebraskans, nearly 100% of rural Nebraskans get their drinking water from groundwater. So if you live in a town, or even if you live in a small area where there's 25 people getting their water from the same system, there are requirements for regular testing of the water as well as treatment. And they have to meet something called a maximum contaminant level, which basically means this is the maximum amount of a contaminant that we can see in drinking water and consider it safe for the length of your life. So for nitrate, there is a maximum level that we consider safe of 10 milligrams per liter or 10 parts per million. That 10 is our magic number, and Laura will hit on that again later and tell you why. So you know that if you're in town, you are getting water that is safe to drink, and the nitrate is less than 10 milligrams per liter. It may not always smell good, but it is safe to drink. Now, if you are in rural Nebraska, rural Nebraskans predominantly get their drinking water from private drinking water wells. Then in this case, there is no requirement for these individuals to test or treat their water. It is solely the responsibility of the individual to make sure that they have safe drinking water. So that's a lot of pressure put onto the individual homeowner or well owner that lives in rural Nebraska. So we're going to take a look at nitrate across the state in groundwater, focusing on groundwater because that's where we get our drinking water. Nebraska has been collectively sampling groundwater for 241 different contaminants since the 1970s. This table shows you the most commonly found compounds in our Nebraska groundwater. There's only 12 that show up more than 50 times over that period from the 1970s. And the one that shows up overwhelming the most is nitrate, showing up in 91% of our samples across Nebraska. Now, there is a case where 2 parts per million, so if you see 2 milligrams per liter, it's possible that that is background nitrogen that would be naturally existing. But if you see more than that number, you know that we've probably had some sort of anthropogenic, some sort of human impact on how much nitrogen is in our groundwater. So let's take a look at it visually. This is what nitrate looks like in Nebraska. All the dots are wells that have been sampled across the state. This is the last 20 years worth of data that has been processed. And if you see a dot on there that is in green, that means that you probably have background naturally occurring nitrogen concentrations in that well. Anything in yellow to red is creeping up to where it is above that 10 milligrams per liter, or that level where we recommend humans do not drink the water. And anything in that pink and purple is already above that. We are concerned, especially for humans and drinking water consumption, but there's a lot of concern as well for livestock producers, especially as it relates to reproduction. So if you look at the nitrogen concentrations in water all across the state, we have the state average. And on average, over the last 20 years, our nitrogen concentrations have increased from just above 5 milligrams per liter to a little above 6 milligrams per liter. So it's under that safe level of 10 milligrams per liter. But really what is more important than our statewide average is what it looks like locally. This map is the last map I'm going to show you and make you look at the numbers. But if basically what this map is showing you is nitrate concentration by township. So if you are serving any of the areas that are already in orange, purple, or blue, you really likely have clients that are already having water that is above that 10 milligrams per liter, above that drinking water standard. If you have areas that you are serving that are in yellow, you might have a few spots where water quality is really good and some where water quality is really poor. Each and every case will be different. The quality of water as it pertains to nitrate will depend on the land practices in the area, the depth of the well, the soil type, the aquifer you're in, the screening depth or where the well is pulling water, and both historical and current activities in the area. So there's lots of things that will change what your nitrate concentration might be in drinking water from a very localized level to a township or neighborhood type level, all the way out to a full aquifer level. So the real question is, why do I care if I have these high nitrate concentrations? And that's where Laura is going to jump in.
Yeah, so thank you, Katie, for that good background and introduction. As she said, I am an extension educator, source water protection extension educator, and I focus on the human health aspect of all of this. So as Katie just mentioned, the maximum contaminant level currently for nitrate in drinking water is 10 parts per million. And this was set for infant development of methemoglobinemia. So in the late 1900s, they started seeing a lot of cases of infants experiencing methemoglobinemia. And they discovered that all of these infants were drinking formula that was mixed with water with levels of really high nitrate. So they found 10 parts per million was good enough. So that was why that limit was set. But this was not set for any other health outcomes. They were not considered at this time. But since the late 1900s, many studies have come out trying to understand if there are any other health outcomes related, and these studies continue to be published. Some have taken place right here in Nebraska by the University of Nebraska Medical Center and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And they have found that higher concentrations of nitrate in drinking water have been linked to other poor health outcomes as well. So the strongest links are minor health ailments, methemoglobinemia, preterm birth issues, birth defects, pediatric cancers, and adult cancers. I do want to note as well, methemoglobinemia is also sometimes called blue baby syndrome, just as a side note. Next slide, Katie. So this is just a summary of some of the adult health research that's been going on relating nitrate, contaminated water, and human health. So as I just mentioned, the minor health ailments such as increased heart rate, nausea, headaches, abdominal cramps. Cancers are highly studied, and potentially associated cancers are colorectal cancer and thyroid disease. They're the most common cancers we've been seeing as well as kidney cancer, bladder cancer, and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Other studies have tried to see the link between Alzheimer's, diabetes, and Parkinson's. That research is relatively newer, still happening. And then maternal and fetal health issues. These are of high concern and very important, something we focus a lot of our efforts on. And those involve miscarriages, preterm births, fetal growth restrictions, and birth defects. So I wanted to show this map just to kind of give you all an idea of birth defects in Nebraska. So the national birth defect rate is 3.3% of all live births, and the average rate in Nebraska is 5.8%. And if you can't see the map, the darker purple is where there are higher rates of birth defects compared to the lighter purple, where there are fewer birth defects seen. And especially over in eastern Nebraska, you can see that some counties reach 9 to 12% of all live births have birth defects, which is triple or quadruple the national average. So this is really concerning. And they also found that these counties with the higher birth defects have had a greater prevalence of agrochemicals in the water. Next slide, please. So there's also been health issues in children's research. So they have found various health impacts have been identified. Methemoglobinemia, blue baby syndrome has been found within infants less than 6 months. Pediatric brain cancers as well, which I'll talk about a bit more. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So Martha Rhodes did a study or took part in a study right here in Nebraska, and she found that with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, they had a 3-fold increase in risk with nitrate and atrazine in the water in the Nebraska study, increased risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So we have a really high rate of pediatric cancer in Nebraska. Our incidence is among the top 5 states in the entire US. And within the Midwest, we have the highest rate. So as you can see on this map, the average Midwest incidence is 172.9, and our average incidence within Nebraska is 183.2. So this is, of course, very concerning and a very high rate. And I just wanted to include this map. So A, B, and C represent a different kind of pediatric cancer. So A represents central nervous system tumors, B represents leukemia, and C represents lymphoma. And it's by watershed instead of county like the birth defects map was. So as you can see, A, so central nervous system tumors, there's a high rate within the eastern part of Nebraska, and you can potentially see the correlation with the row crop farming in eastern Nebraska. A lot of corn is being farmed over there, and we also are seeing really, really high rates of central nervous system tumors. I forgot to mention the pink salmon color is above the national average, and the green is below the national average. And so you can potentially in B and C, in the maps of B and C, also see some correlations, but we definitely see it within A and D for sure. So yeah, there are definitely health impacts that we are seeing and of concern, and it's really important to get these folks in Nebraska drinking clean water. All of these health impacts with these articles coming out can be controversial, but we do have data to show and support these health impacts related to nitrate in drinking water.
Thanks, Laura. And I guess I'll take it over in terms of the treatment options that we have that will relate to this incentive program that we're talking about later with Katie. So I'm Carla McCullough, Watershed Science Extension Educator, and Becky Schuerman helped develop a lot of this material that we'll talk about drinking water nitrate. So in general, we're looking at point of use systems for households, and these provide a centrally located tap to reduce that risk of the adverse health effects that Laura was talking about. And in particular, we're focusing on just the nitrate issue for these systems. There are, lots of treatment systems. What we're talking about, again, is just reverse osmosis. If you hear other talk about carbon filters or distillation, that's not what we're talking about for nitrates. So in general, the reverse osmosis systems are pressure-driven membrane systems. They remove over 95% of most contaminants, and to prolong the health and functioning of these systems, pretreatment is often required. So that includes sediment filters and water softening, and I won't talk much about those. Can move on. This just is a neat graphic to kind of show basically the pressure-driven system that the RO systems use. So you will, if you notice water droplets coming in, going down through the membrane clean, and then some water is going out the side and is still contaminated. So point being is that there will be some wastewater that will contribute some to your septic system in rural areas. And then the average cost of these point of use systems are between $200 and $2,000, really depending on all the features that you decide or that may be needed for your system. Installation costs are another consideration. So they are anywhere from $100 to $800 typically, again, depending on the type and complexity of your system. And really important point here is that a plumber must install the system to be eligible for this rebate program. And I think Katie will talk more about that as well. And then, of course, then there's always the maintenance and operation of these systems. Those range from $50 to $200 per year, depending on how many filters, membranes you'll need to be replacing. It is really crucial if you think that you are the kind of person that will forget to change filters. These things are only as good as they are maintained. Becky highly recommended setting up a maintenance contact with a reputable company that you could, if you do that, of course, that's going to be an additional fee, but they will come around and replace and maintain your system for you. In terms of lifetime treatment considerations, with any drinking water system, it's only as good as it's maintained. Like I said before, and regular maintenance is hugely important. Pre-filters and post-filters that require that maintenance, the length of time in between that will depend on the water volume that's going through the system, the quality of the water and contaminant concentration that you are dealing with your own systems. Post-filter replacement depends on contaminant concentration as well. And basically manufacturers and dealers can help with those replacement intervals. So, and concluding, basically the waste from an RO system will go to wastewater and increase that load on your septic system.
You're muted, Katie.
That is my role for the day. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, so we've hit on several things. We hit on what the nitrate concentrations look like within Nebraska, and we know that we have several pockets where we have high nitrate concentrations. We talked about the health impacts of nitrate in our drinking water, with the primary ones being reproductive and oxygen transport for youth, but with several new things being researched primarily based out of UNMC. So they're Nebraska specific with a national impact. And we talked about the basics of how you treat nitrate in drinking water. And those basics being, you can look at doing a whole household system where you treat all the water coming through the house, or you can look at using a point of use system, which basically means you treat nitrate at the sink that you are going to drink from. So now we're going to talk about an opportunity we have in Nebraska for 2023 and 2024. In 2023, the Nebraska legislature passed LB 1014. This bill took $4 million from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, and allocated it to treating nitrate issues in Nebraska. $1.2 million of that is dedicated specifically to this reverse osmosis rebate program that is only for private drinking well owners. So it's a real opportunity for rural Nebraskans owning their own wells. The general idea of the program is that any individual private drinking water well owner can test their water, and if the nitrate concentration is above 10 parts per million, then they can be eligible for up to $4,000 of support to get a reverse osmosis system. So we're going to dig into the details of this program. All right, so the program opened January 1st, so about 5 days ago. It officially closes on June 24th of 2024. I would suggest to you that if you are in an area with high nitrate, you want to encourage your clientele to apply sooner than later. The first review of applications will happen in March, and it's probably the expectation that most of this funding will disappear or be allocated within the first 3 to 6 months of the program. So if you're thinking about a newsletter, a Facebook post, a tweet, anything like that, I'm happy to work with you on those and we can get them put together for you to get out quicker than very quickly. So who's eligible? Anyone with a private well. The private well must be registered. And you have to test your water with the state laboratory based out of Lincoln. This is your DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services laboratory, and only wells that have nitrogen above 10 parts per million will be eligible for the program. So we are going to give this flyer to every one of you. We're also going to send it out all county, and we have it on our water.unl.edu website under the nitrate page. So you're going to all get this. Basically, it walks you through eligibility requirements, how to apply, and it's got all the links you could need. So if you want to print this out for your front office, if you want to have this available, this is a resource for you to walk through things with a client that might come into the office. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and get your well tested with the state lab. You have this link here that says order test kit. If you follow the link, it sends you to a very simple form with your name and information to fill out. The test kit is $16, plus you have to do shipping to get it back. They will ship it to you for no cost. So you have 90 days to take a test of your water. After that, the thing that stabilizes it in the sample jar will go bad. And so then you test your water, you can mail it back. It has to be received within 30 hours, and then they will go ahead and test it. If your nitrate concentration is above 10 parts per million, then you can take the next step. If you have tested your water with the state lab, if you tested your water last year in 2022 with DHHS, that test counts. So you would not have to test your water again. Once you have done that test, if you are eligible, then you will get paid back for the fee to test your water as well. So then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to check your well registration. All wells that were drilled in Nebraska from 1993 on have been registered. If you have a well that was drilled before September of 1993, it may or may not be registered. So you have to go check your well registration. If it's not registered, then you can register it. And we have another link for that. That link will take you to a form that's quite intense. And that's coming from me, who goes through a fair amount of paperwork. But there is a phone number right on top, and it gets you to one of two people that will effectively take care of it for whoever needs to register a well. So while it may look intimidating, I think the best approach is probably to call the Department of Natural Resources at the number listed at the top of the screen. Once you've figured out if your well is registered or not, you need to get a cost estimate. If you want to participate in the rebate program, before you even apply for the rebate program, you have to get a cost estimate in writing from either a licensed plumber or any entity that has put in 5 RO systems. So basically they have to be licensed, or they have to prove that they have put in 5 RO systems. You cannot, through this rebate program, you cannot go to Menards, purchase the system and install it yourself. It has to be installed by one of those 2 entities. And the person or entity installing the system has to do a couple of hoops. Now, if they're a licensed plumber, they have already done it. If they're not, they may or may not have done these hoops. They're pretty simple, but the estimate that comes to you needs to say, this is the cost of the estimate, and the person installing it has to say, I will not charge for the installation unless after my installation, I can show that it gets the water quality for nitrate concentrations below 10 milligrams per liter. For some rural Nebraska plumbers, that may be something they don't want to address. But I think most of them will guarantee their work because that's what they're looking at doing. Anyway, so once you've done all of those things, you can follow this link to the actual application. And the actual application is very straightforward. So I'm going to briefly share this with you because it is coming right on 10:30 real quick here. But the actual application is very straightforward. Your general applicant information, and then the application itself basically walks you through the things we just said. It says, is your well registered? You click yes or no. You have to show that it's registered. If you say no, you see there's no box for that. If you say no, you can't submit this application. So then the next question is, have you tested your drinking water? What were the results? You have to attach the results. Do you have a cost estimate? Does it have that caveat from the cost estimate? And then there are a series of questions that really come back to whoever you want to install it. They look scary, but they're really quite simple. So I'm not going to cover those. However, if you have a plumber or installer in your area that has questions about these, I think that person, I would have you just send them directly to me, and I can either walk them through it, or I can send them to someone with the NDEE that can get even more specific. And then I will say there is this last little bit on here that says that if your RO system doesn't work, the NDEE doesn't get in trouble. Finally, there are things that you will have to have a client submit. And I'm not saying you will have to, it's just that as part of this process, they will get their rebate, and then they have to send all of these things that say, I'm a citizen, I confirm that a plumber installed it, I can show you the after test. It is fairly intense. But it's not really that bad. The reason we're sharing this out with an extension is that we do have this brand new program that is highly impactful, especially for us in rural Nebraska. And knowing that in extension, we serve all 93 counties and we have that connection, you may be able to promote the program, you may be able to assist people in applying, or you may be even able to just send them in the right direction for questions. With that, I am going to stop, and it is officially 10:33. We will stick around for questions. If you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat box and we'll make sure that we get them addressed. All right. Brandy says news columns and social media posts would be great. And you know what, actually, we do have a set of social media posts that we can share out that were originally developed by the NARD. So we can do that we'll share it out to everyone who participated. Brandy, you asked a really good question about what about replacing old systems? I'm going to real quick, before we continue.